I'm John Belizaire. I am CEO of Soluna Computing, and we believe that the future of renewable energy is computing. What we're trying to do is increase the percentage of renewable energy in the world by significantly reducing the amount of curtailment or wasted energy that renewable energy power plants experience. And we do that by building these flexible data centers that are specifically designed to work in these intermittent environments. And we place them behind the meter with the power plants, the ones that are experiencing these challenges. And we absorb that energy and convert it into compute-intensive applications on a global basis. And going forward, we think that more and more of this will happen. And our hope is that this type of computing becomes a new infrastructure element, much like the talk around batteries and transmission to the renewable energy and grid infrastructure.
So what we're here to do is talk a little bit about the future of power markets and talk about resiliency in power markets. So, we're going to rely on your expertise as developers, as forecasters, policy experts, developers, to think a little bit about that. And a good place to start, and I'll call on you guys if that's okay. So I'm gonna ask you, John, the first question, which is, what investments or technologies are needed to create a more resilient grid?
Yeah, I get asked this question a lot. We spend a lot of time with IPPs, and more recently in conferences, we're talking about sort of the future of renewables and the grid. And I would say that if you were to fast forward a decade from now, the definition of grid infrastructure would be completely different. You'll have a much smarter grid that's aware of the demand profile of its load. You'll have a grid that's more interconnected across different markets. I think that you're going to see more software used to manage the infrastructure. And I think you'll see an infrastructure that is today very brittle being enhanced by adding infrastructure that you wouldn't never have thought of. You're going to see long duration batteries. I think we will ultimately get there. You're going to see new advances in transmission, and you're also going to see more infrastructure that's smart, so it knows when to wake up and absorb power or produce power, things like that. So I think in terms of investments, what we need to see more of is technology that is not your sort of traditional project, if you will, that is geared toward investing in the infrastructure of this country and other countries. So batteries are, I think, are very sort of legacy at this point technology, even though it's sort of seen as the future of solving these great challenges. Yeah, I would say that demand response is a powerful capability that you need to add to the grid infrastructure. But I think the perception is today typically that you're either a large manufacturing facility that can sort of ramp up very quickly, or someone can convince hundreds of thousands of homes to plug in smart devices that can be sort of controlled. But I think what we miss is that there's a technology today, computing, that has limitless demand, and it is very, very rapid. It can stand up. It can be done almost anywhere in the world now. And there's a class of applications like machine learning and AI that we all have devices in our pockets. There's a machine in there collecting data that goes to this, accumulated place somewhere in the world that's processing that. Well, that's being done by computing, and that computing needs to be powered by energy. And so you're going to see a rapid conversion from electrons to computing. And computing is a very, very efficient and fast demand response solution. We've experienced it ourselves. We were developing wind in Northern Africa. We had a 900 megawatt plant, and guess what? We needed a demand response solution. Actually, the power was stranded, so we needed to figure out a way to monetize it. But when the grid came, the computing became a demand response solution, and that's how we sort of got the light bulb that this could be a solution overall, another additive capability for the grid.
So you're talking about a combination of batteries, you're talking about computing power, you're talking about demand response, all of this getting rolled out in the future, creating a more flexible grid. Question is, who's going to own and operate these assets, and how can I finance them when they arrive? Do you guys have any views on what those business models are going to be? Is it going to be a traditional sort of project model? Is it going to be more of a utility model? Will it be more integrated? What do you guys think?
Yeah, I mean, I think where's the capital going to come from? It's going to come from a lot of places that weren't traditionally in infrastructure or renewables. I mean, we're looking at all markets in the country. We have about 300 megawatts here in Texas of pipeline that we're developing. And a lot of our capital is surprisingly starting to come from traditional infrastructure investors, people who own renewable assets, who see an opportunity to combine the asset with this, dispatchable or flexible load and create alpha for their investors. They go to capital allocators that are a little more open to risk, and they're seeing good uptake for that. In other markets where we're going to, you're seeing venture capital, you're seeing the public markets sort of entering the space. I think when there's a really good solution to a problem and it starts to get deployed at scale, capital just finds its way to supporting it. And so I think you're going to see more and more of traditional capital that's supporting large projects go after these new technology markets too.
How are you guys thinking about, so as you're rolling out, we're talking about more and more behind the meter type offerings. How easy it is and what sort of roadblocks need to be removed to be able to roll out those technologies and really deploy them at scale?
I'll go. I spend a lot of my time talking to ISOs and all sorts of regulators and convincing them that a law that they wrote 50 years ago makes no sense whatsoever right now. Well, so this concept of, is this legal, is sort of irrelevant. The point is, if you want to add more diverse types of generation to the grid and you want to add flexibility, you have to make protocols and law frameworks and whatnot that have been out there more flexible, or rewrite them, because that's what the future really demands. And so, we were talking about who does it well. I was talking with NYSO and NYSERDA last summer, and it was just fascinating to me. They were sort of writing this new behind the meter construct that was specifically tuned to batteries, because conceptually that's the only thing they could imagine that would sort of be back there. And I said, well, what if there was this thing, and they said, wow, that's fascinating. You got to come in here and tell us more before we put a bow on this thing. And I did, and they sort of started to rethink the whole law framework, because technology is one of those things that just creeps up on you, and it can change the world very quickly. But regulation is designed to do the opposite. It's designed to sort of set things in stone to create protections, but it's not very flexible. And I think that's going to be something that just about every ISO is going to deal with here in the next few years.
Yeah, how did that conversation go with PJM?
Probably not as yeah, they're the worst actually. ERCOT, at least, they act like they're listening to you, and they sort of make some changes, and we've seen some changes. But in other countries, we're seeing law frameworks, joining the docket that we're in, and they're becoming a lot more, because there are just real challenges with how you get the grid more green, and you just can't have old laws and protocols stand in the way of that. Maybe I'm the newbie, but shouldn't the question be gas prices are up, who cares? Because I feel like the world is all in this really fast Tesla right now. We're just going really fast on ESG, and that consciousness has already shifted. And I don't see anybody taking their foot off the gas and trying to hit the brake on that to you guys. I think that there's more than enough capital to support that new momentum. And I think it's just going to increase the amount of capital that comes into anything that's green and supports ESG goals. I don't think that's going to change in a year. I'm trying to understand what would cause it to change. That's just my perspective. But I'm the newbie, I'm just saying.
I think you're right. The one thing that's hanging out there is inflation and concerns around that. And to the extent that it's energy driven, which a lot of it is, could be an X factor there.
Crystal ball, I'll ask you guys sort of one after another. 10, 15, 20 years down the road, quite a ways away. What does power generation consumption look like? What are the big changes that you expect to see over that very long term?
I think you're going to see more vertically integrated projects that have renewable assets combined with flexible compute. I think you're going to see more movement to the grid to incorporate utility scale demand response solutions to give the grid more flexibility as more renewables come online. And I think you're going to see a vast increase in the amount of anything that's out there, electrical vehicles, anything that's traditionally powered by fossil fuels will now be electron powered. And so that's going to make the grid more of a sort of raw material provider to just about everything in our lives. Well, yeah, if you invite me back, we'll definitely be talking about what I'm working on. So that'll be one of them. I think we're going to be talking a lot about, I agree with sort of how that new capital is being deployed and what's driving it. And I also think we're going to be remarking around how certain initiatives are accelerating, like EV and things like that in the marketplace and how that's changing. And I think the last thing is, in probably a year, you'll see different makeup of people in this room. You're probably going to have a completely new type of capital that's coming into this industry that you've never seen before.
Yeah, I think